Hey everybody, it's Eugene Licio here, and welcome to Forensics Talks. And this is episode 74. We made it all the way to 74, which is great. And today my guest is going to be Douglas Young. Now, before we get started here, I'm just going to be doing a quick announcement, and that has to do with the upcoming Forensic Photography Symposium. And so this is an event that I had put on last year. It was to bring together people who are working in the area of forensic photography and for crash scene investigation, crime scene investigation. And based on the success we had last year, I was asked to do it again. And I said, you know what, let's do it. We had a good time. There was really good exchange of information and everything else. So if you are interested, all you need to do is head over to the website. So Forensic Photography Symposium, just go to www.ai2-3d.com/FPS. I just have it up on the screen. And we just put up today a new schedule. So we're fairly updated here. We're almost 100% full, a whole bunch of different speakers on a number of very different topics. So everything from postmortem, crash, blood, macro photography, UV, IR conversions, and things like that. And I'm very pleased this year as well because we have a number of different companies that are going to be helping us out. So Nikon, Canon, Fuji, we have Kolari. So different people who do different things in the area. And so I think it's going to be pretty good. We also have the speakers here. So if you want to jump over and just head over to the speakers list here. Let's see that I hit it there. There we go. And you'll be able to see that, different people, new people, a lot of new faces and a few returning ones as well. So just head over, feel free to register. Registration is open. We don't really have a lot of room for presentations. Might be a couple of little small talks in the abstracts. If you're interested, submit and let me know. But that's pretty much it for the FPS. So let me prepare that. All right. So let's get started here. So my guest today is Douglas Young, and Douglas began his training as a crime scene technician for the Gibson County Sheriff's Department, and he held that position all the way back starting from 1993 till about 1998. And later on, he went to chief of police with the Oakland City Police Department, and that started from about 2002, and that's in Indiana, by the way, where he served until May 2007. And right after that, he moved to Thornton, Colorado, where he accepted a position as a crime scene investigator with the Thornton Police Department Crime Lab. And in 2009, Doug was promoted to Senior Criminalist, and he continues to serve in that capacity today. Now, Doug is somebody who's lectured domestically and internationally on a whole bunch of different topics. And in reviewing his CV, he's got a ton of training and a ton of different things that he's worked on. So crime scene investigation, forensic entomology, bloodstain pattern analysis, shooting reconstruction, and just general crime scene reconstruction. So a whole bunch of different things. He's very knowledgeable. He's been qualified as an expert at the federal and state courts. And I first met Doug I think I met him at the ACER conference, so the Association of Crime Scene Reconstruction in Tacoma, Washington. At least that's where I first remember meeting him. And the first thing I think that impressed me about him was he's just a really open individual. He's the kind of person that can talk to anybody and, sort of make you feel good and joke around and have some smiles. But it wasn't until about 3 years ago, and I think that was the ACER conference in Nevada, in Reno, Nevada. In fact, that's the mug that I got from there, that I first heard him speak on, like forensic professionals dealing with tragic incidents. And I'll say that I saw him again just a couple of months ago at the IABPA conference in San Diego. And even though it was the second time I had heard that presentation, it's something that always strikes a chord with you. And it's a very sincere presentation and something that I thought was really important to talk about. So I want to bring him in here today. And here he is. Hey, Doug, how you doing?
Hey, Eugene, how are you?
Excellent. Hey, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's get started with you first. I want to, let me see, get you back there. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can keep me off.
No. Let's start with you. And I want to know about your background. I talked a little bit about, some of the moves you've made in your career. But were you always like forensics, like you knew you were going to get into forensics or policing? Like what was your background or thinking, the little young Doug running around going, I'm going to be in forensics?
Yeah, I grew up. I grew up on a farm in southern Indiana, and a cattle farm, and was a little 4-H kid, and doing fun things like that. And always was interested in science. I remember that my fifth grade science teacher told me, she said, "Hey, you know, science will solve a lot of things in your life." And I always took that to heart. So I always, a lot of people out there probably won't remember Dr. Quincy, but I always wanted to be Dr. Quincy, you know. And but I went the law enforcement route, and got my degree in forensics, and started working crime scenes, and just, you know, continued down that path. I worked for the sheriff's department there in Indiana, and I was teaching the DARE program, and decided, you know, I wanted to get out of the schools and do more forensic stuff, and so I moved to Austin, Texas, and that was a really a really big move for a country boy going to a big city, but it was a phenomenal move for me. And you know, when we talk about emotional wellness, I think that was where I first really realized, that was the area where, man, the things that I'm seeing and the things that I'm experiencing were affecting me. And
Hmm.
I don't know that they were affecting me, that I realized it, right? I told myself I have this switch. And I've heard a lot of people tell me that over the years. I have this switch in the back of my head, and when I go home, I flip it off, and when I go to work, I flip it back on. Um, and I said the same thing. And over the years, I found that that switch uh, shorted out, and we can get into that later more about that. But you know, we have to take care of ourselves, and we have to figure out that that switch is fragile, so to
Right.
speak.
Right. Well, you know, when I first met you, and I didn't quite say this, but you know, I did say, like, you're a very personal guy. You talk to anybody from what I've seen. You know, you'll joke around with anybody and welcome everybody, which is great. But you don't come across as a, how can I say this, an overly sensitive or emotional guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you know what I mean? Like you wouldn't think that of you, and I still don't think that of you actually. But you know, you're sort of a person now that does talk about emotions and how people feel, and so that's really quite a sort of quite a change, and maybe some people may not expect that from you.
Right. Well, I think it's funny that you say that, because people that you would talk to, you know, years ago, or even probably now, that knew me all through my life, they would be, "Are you kidding me? Doug Young is not the guy that talks about his feelings. He's not the person that would talk about how he felt and what he did." And I think, you know, part of that, Eugene, is the culture that I came up in. You know, I'm an old guy, and I came up in the culture of, we didn't talk about feelings. We didn't. We went from call to call to call. We shoved our feelings down, and we dealt with it. And it wasn't for me until I had to do that. And the way I kind of describe it is, we all have this bucket, and as you know, we deal with calls, we deal with bad things, that stuff goes in the bucket. And you have to poke a hole in the bottom of that bucket to let some of that stuff out. You have to drain that, or otherwise it just continues to fill up.
Hmm.
And unless you let it out, it's going to overflow. And for me, it was my health that caused me to have to deal with it.
Okay. Yeah, and I want to ask you about your personal story, like maybe like what happened to you and kind of how things went for you. I know firsthand that there's people chiming in today that probably have been through a bad time, or maybe still be going through a bad time. And I know colleagues, because I work very closely with a number of police agencies who have just whatever it was, one thing, or maybe it was accumulation of things, but then there was one thing in particular that was like the trigger, and then they couldn't work anymore, so they had to take some time off to recover from something that was sensitive to them. I'm sort of fortunate because I don't have to deal with that on a daily basis. I'm not a first responder. I have been to some things which have definitely left an impression upon me, but I don't have to deal with that. So let me ask you first about the kinds of things, the different types of things that can cause, I'll call it emotional instability. Like I obviously, you know, you just mentioned the fact that, you know, you guys are dealing with very tragic incidents. And so that's definitely one, but there's other things too, no?
Yeah, yeah, so I look at, it's a culmination of things. And one of the things that and I'll start here. One of the things that we looked at was, we looked at the difference, and I didn't really realize it until, actually I got here to Thornton. When you look at the patrol side of stress, patrol officers have stress where they are responding call to call to call to call. And so, in a sense, their stress is short duration, but more stress, but for a short duration. For a forensic investigator, we are looking at stress prolonged. So, for instance, we're in scenes for days at a time. We're in a scene dealing with horrible, awful things. But then when we leave the scene, we're still dealing with it because we're going to an autopsy, we're doing a sketch, we're doing trial preparation, we're doing all of these things afterwards. And so we don't get away from it for maybe years at a time. So you have that, but then on top of that, and what a lot of people don't realize, and I didn't realize, was that you have the daily stresses of life, right? You have the stresses of home, you have the stresses of finances, you have the stresses of all of those other things that compound, and they all affect each other. And I can tell you from my perspective, I know for a fact, and I didn't realize it at the time, but the stress that I was enduring at work was affecting my home life. It definitely was. And my family was telling me, you're being an ass. You're mean. You're doing things that you don't normally do. And I was saying, no, I'm not. I'm not doing that. I'm normal. And I wasn't. And it wasn't till after I got help. It wasn't till after that I educated myself that I realized, yes, I was. They were right.
Right. So, I mean, you've been sort of an advocate right now for, emotional wellness and things like that. But what can you tell me about your story? Like when did it all first, like, what was the spark for you? What was the first thing where you started noticing something, and how did that progress to, leader?
So I had two cases, and that's what really triggered me. The first case was in Austin, and I'll be brief, but it was a child case, and it was a baby death, uh, very very bad case. It was a car accident, um, and so I dealt with that, but I didn't deal with it in the sense where I went and talked to anyone about it. And it was very gruesome. It was uh, very bad. I had nightmares. I would not, you know, go that way to work. I would go around that area. I wouldn't deal with it. And it was about, I think it was about 16 years later. I'm in Thornton, and I have another child death. And here's the thing that was really interesting to me. I had worked child deaths in between that time, right? And I go into the ER on this child death in Thornton, and I go in to take photographs of this child, and I uncover the child, and I start to take photographs, and my heart starts pounding. I break out in a sweat, and I tell the detective who's in the room, I said, I'm having a heart attack. I literally think I'm having a heart attack. And the nurse is in the ER. And it's funny now, it wasn't at the time. She's like, Criminalist Young, do we need a room for you? And I'm like, no, I just need to calm down. Um, but it was, Austin flashed back instantly. And so I'm like, something's going on here. And it was about 2 weeks later, I was at home and I was laying in bed getting ready to go to sleep, and I started just seizing. I had a grand mal seizure. And of course, to me, I was like, what the hell is going on? Right? Like it freaked me out. And it was about a week later I had another one. And so that was the trigger, or the clue to me that, hey, something's going on here. So on top of that, then now I'm trying to get help, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. The doctors are like, hey, we don't know what's going on. Your blood work's fine. All of this is fine. We're going to admit you to the hospital. We're going to try to figure it out, right? We're going to do these scans, and we're going to do all this stuff. That was even more stressful because they have you in a hospital bed, right? They have an alarm on the hospital bed, and they won't even let you get up to go pee by yourself. So, right? So I can't even get up out of the bed. And what I found out later was that they're trying to induce a seizure to try to figure out what this is. And so in the end, they say, well, there's nothing wrong with your brain. And of course, jokingly, me, right, I'm saying, are you sure, doc? Because come on now. But in the end, the diagnosis was PTSD. And the psychiatrist that they gave me to help with it said, she used the bucket analogy. Your bucket is so full that your body, you have refused to deal with this stress, with these horrible things, that your body has forced you to do it. And of course, I'm in denial. And I said, listen, doc, PTSD is what veterans have. PTSD is what, our heroes who have gone to war, who come back, that's what they have. They're the people that have been in battle. And she says to me, she says, Doug, what do you think you go to every day when you go to a crime scene? You go to battle. You go to battle, and you battle these demons in these scenes. You battle darkness. Mm-hmm. It is PTSD. And that was an awakening for me to be like, wow, okay, I have to do something about this.
Yeah. Do people around you, I mean, people know you now, and they've heard your story every now and then, but do you find that a lot more people are like reaching out to you now and they say, hey man, I need to talk to you, or they can relate to a lot of what you're saying?
I do, Eugene. And here's the thing that it took me a long time to do this, but it was one of my colleagues here in Colorado, and he was one of the investigators at Columbine, and he told me, he said, you need to spread the word. You need to talk about this. And it took me a while, and the word that I use to describe it is, I decided that I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm not afraid to make myself vulnerable, to go out there and to open myself up. To me, vulnerability is power. And if I can do that, and I can save one person, if I can keep one person from having to go through the crap that I went through, it is completely worth it. It is 100% worth it.
You talked about like when you started, I mean, you've been around a while. We're talking about like 90s, right? So, and some of the differences, like when you started, that, it wasn't something you talked about and things like that. So I'm wondering about today. I think people are more sensitive to it, a little bit more sensitive to it today, but are, police agencies and these different types of agencies, are they well equipped today to prepare people for, what's coming their way?
I think, yes, the answer is yes and no. I think some are, and I think some are not. And I think we have to do a better job of educating. We have to do a better job of educating some of these agencies the peer support, get that word out there, and talk about this is a real issue. I mean, we look at the number of suicides, officer suicides, forensic investigator suicides. They're off of the charts, and we need to do better in educating. I know our department. I at one time went to our chief and I said, listen, the stress, the things that we deal with is different for crime scene investigators than it is for patrol. And our chief was open. He said, you know what, Doug, I didn't realize that. I did not realize the difference. And I said, it's different for dispatchers. It's different for victim services. And he said, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. What do we do? How do we change it? Right? And he was very open. And I think educating is a key. But the other thing is I think we can all, every single one of us can be a helpful person, because a lot of times, Eugene, all it takes is just showing up. All it takes is just being there. And the biggest thing that I've learned is just listening. Just listening. As law enforcement, as investigators, and all, we're problem solvers, right? That's what we do. That's what we're programmed to do. And I myself have to fight a lot of times just to listen. But most of the time, people just want someone to listen.
Right,
And
right.
it's just a matter of showing up, being there, and listening. And,
Yeah.
and it's huge.
I know that the problem may be larger than we think, because I know, especially over the past couple of years now, with the whole COVID situation, and I have a lot of police colleagues, so I won't mention any agency specifically, but I think you probably know too, there are a lot of police and people in forensics and working for the police, people who are off, and they're off because of stress, because of emotional issues and that sort of thing. And I was shocked to find out exactly, what percentage, like we're talking about percentage of a police force, people from patrol and that are off right now. So um, what kinds of things can we see about a person, or what kinds of things will help us detect when a person needs to be spoken to? Because sometimes it's like a surprise. Maybe somebody comes and they appear perfectly normal. You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe, but maybe there may be the little things that are little signals saying, hey, maybe there's something going on here that I should talk to this person about, or I need to have them, they need a shoulder. Like what kinds of things can you detect?
I think the biggest things that I've seen are anxiety, if they're showing irritability, loss of interest. That's a big one that I found. I had a colleague who was he lived to go fly fishing. I mean, phenomenal fly fisherman. And I was talking to him one day, and he says, "Just I don't want to fly fish anymore. I don't have any interest in doing it." And I'm like, "You know what, dude? What's going on? What's up?"
Hmm.
And we sat down and we talked. And sure enough, he had some things that were going on. But it was just that small thing, that small clue that clued me in. But it's the change. It's just a simple change in the behaviors. And one of the other things that I know I talked about in the class that we were in, but there's a good approach too. Like if you notice that in someone, um, and I come up to you and I say, "Hey, how you doing?" Your natural response is going to be, "Hey, Doug, I'm doing great, right? I'm doing fine. It's awesome." So I've had to change the way I do that. And if I see my partner or I see you, I'm going to say, "What's going on in your head today? You look a little down."
Hmm.
It's a different approach, but what it does is it requires a response from you other than, "I'm fine, Doug. I'm good." And so just simple wording, and I've noticed that helps. That helps. But yeah, just I've noticed sometimes in my partners their inability to focus. Just they're spacing out. They disassociate. They're off in space somewhere. Just little things like that.
Yeah. Um, when it comes to getting help, there was a few things that coming into my mind from the class. Actually, one was the seeds. Remember we talked about the seeds. We'll get
Yeah.
to that. I may have to ask you about that. Remind me about the seeds after. But um, how does somebody start on the path to, like, recovery, or like, um, just getting better?
I the first thing is the first thing is to recognize it. And I think, again, I'll use myself as an example. It took me a long time to recognize it. We I did not want to recognize it. I was normal. So I had to recognize the fact that, yeah, I got a problem. Um, and I went to counseling. Counseling was very good. It's getting that out there. It's getting that, hey, this is what's going on. And the thing that I found, Eugene, was I'm not the only one that's experiencing these things, right? I'm not unique in that, hey, I feel this way. I'm not weird because I feel this way. And the other thing is it's okay to talk. You're not weak. You're not weak to talk about your feelings. And I think when I came up, like I said, in law enforcement, you were weak if you talked about it. No, to me, it's completely opposite. That makes you stronger. It
Hmm.
makes you better, um, at what you're doing. And so, I think that's the first thing. And then one thing that I recommend to people is when you're looking for a counselor, make sure that you find a counselor that's trained in emergency services. That's a huge thing. When I first started going through, I found a couple of counselors, but they weren't trained in emergency services, and so they had no idea what I was dealing with, and so I had to work through a couple of counselors before I found the right one. Um, and there's all kinds of treatment things out there. One of the things that I like, uh, which was really good, was cognitive behavioral therapy, um, and that's one thing. And if you imagine a triangle, and you have thought, behavior, and action, if you change one of those, it changes the others.
Hmm.
So if I can change the way I think about things, it changes the way that I react. Right?
Right.
Changes the way I feel. So that was very cool. And then we can talk maybe towards the end about EMDR, and that was probably the best thing for me. That um, I mean, I'm a total um, fan of it, and I recommend it.
Okay. What about I mean, people talk about, like working out and just a good family life, and all the support things that can help to, how can I say, slow down the filling of the bucket per se, or maybe try to empty the bucket, time away, or stuff like that. What other things can, like, a person do to help their situation?
Definitely, I mean, definitely exercise. The three things that I was told that you can do immediately to relieve stress: breathing, eating, and exercise. So, proper breathing, and I'm not going to teach it on here.
Okay.
Exercise, and that's simply going for a walk, just getting away, getting out of the office if you're in an office environment, right? If you've had an argument with your spouse, whatever, going for a walk, and then eating, having a balanced meal. That could be just some mixed nuts, an egg, something like that. Those Just the breathing will activate the body's natural pharmacy of the calming drugs, the calming uh, hormones.
Right.
So that will immediately calm you. Working out, again, yes, that's phenomenal. But that breathing and those things will instantly help you.
There was something that.
And you may make a great point. Make sure you take your vacation time. You know, I was a workaholic. And someone told me, they said, you know what, you work to live, right? You work to live, not live to work. So um, and I agree with that. I agree with that. Take your time away. Take your time.
Yeah, that's important. And luckily, I have some good people that drag me away every now and
That's
then when
right.
I need it.
Good.
So yeah,
Good.
there's a question that you asked at the it was at the IBPA, and I found it really interesting. But it had to do with where people sometimes felt more stressed, like for example, like at a crime scene or sometimes in the office.
Yeah.
And I was surprised at the answer. So is that something you found kind of common, or?
Yeah, and one of the things that we did, and it was super interesting, and then it was a surprise to me actually that we worked with University of Colorado Hospital. Dr. Mark Moss was very good to us, and we sent out a survey, just very random. We sent it out to different crime scene investigators in the Denver metro area, and we had a list of questions. And what we found was that investigators were as much they had as much stress about the internal workings of their department as they did with working crime scenes. So the internal stress of the organization was just as much as it was for crime scenes, and I
Mhm.
found that very interesting. And so one of the things was, how do we deal with that? How do we combat that? And we had some discussions with our chief, with my chief, and at the time, we have a new chief now, but at the time, and I think he was a little taken aback too, but we worked on it, and there's only certain things that you can do, I think, right? But in looking and doing some research, it was like that across the board. It
Yeah,
wasn't just
interesting.
here.
So I'm just curious about the relationship with the universities. Are you doing stuff like that, or continue to do like little research
We haven't,
projects, or?
yeah, we haven't done. COVID kind of hit, and and it kind of died out. But it is something that I'd love to get back to doing. Um, and we haven't done it. We haven't done any more um, at this
Right,
point.
right. Yeah, okay, that's cool. I just want to say to the people who are listening, I forgot to mention at the beginning, but by all means, please comment in the chat window and add any questions if you'd like for Doug here, because we're open to take any questions and that sort of thing, especially on a topic like this. I think that is affecting a lot of different people globally, and I know there's people working in some pretty some pretty tragic things all over the place. So Doug, I was thinking earlier about some of the bigger scenes or bigger traumatic type of scenes that people can go to, so like school shootings, mass shootings, and things like that. Um, when when a situation like that happens, is there any, and again, not being in the police or whatever, but is there any prep? Is there any talk before you get into these kinds of situations with the team? It's not always one person. Like these are larger scenes, so there's typically a group of people. Like Boston Marathon and all those types of events.
Right. Yeah. We have, and I can, here in Colorado, and I know the FBI, they have a team. When we had, well, we didn't, but the Boulder King Supers shooting that was here, they had multiple teams that were there, and we we do here. We have a group called COFIG, Colorado Forensic Investigators Group, and it's not a formal peer support uh, type of group. Our department has a group. Our Thornton Police Department has a group, and so if one of the agencies, so say in Colorado, has something, then we can dispatch our peer support group, and then vice versa. Um, the training that is done here in Colorado is typically done by uh, one or two uh, specific companies, and so we're all trained the same, which is very beneficial. like you're saying, if there's a mass event, we're all trained the same, so we know how to respond and how to deal with that.
Okay. What about people who don't have training? So you told a story about, for example, I don't remember the exact case, but it was the one where you needed a worker to unbolt the, was it the oil,
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah,
yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah. That was one of a very big case here in Colorado, and yeah, the this was a worker who was assisting with this very big case and removing some bodies from a tank, and that situation that's a different situation because at that point no one knew that that person needed help, and it wasn't until almost a year later that they found out that, hey, this person is suffering some severe trauma, some severe PTSD, and once they found out, uh, then we were able to get, or I wasn't, but the agency was able to get this person help, because they were basically working on behalf of law enforcement, right? And so they got them some help.
Right, right. Okay. There's a question here actually by Ryan, and he brings up a good question here, and he says, "Do you see any connection with children with the crime scene officer when the crime scene officer has children of a similar age, or it reminds them of maybe someone that's close to them?"
Oh yeah, that was and that's a great question, Ryan. That the case that I had in Austin, and actually my son was actually the same age, and so I think that that probably was part of the trigger. And then when I came here to Thornton, the the hair from the little guy in Austin and the eyes were almost identical, and I think that was the trigger. And I the thing with triggers is you don't know what they're going to be, and I describe triggers as, you might smell something that reminds you of grandma's house from 20 years ago, and you're like, wow, all these memories come back from when you spent that time at grandma's house. um, but this is, for instance, this little guy's hair and his the eyes, and so that's what triggered me to have that reaction. And so yeah, I think definitely, for me, kid cases are the hardest.
Yeah. So are you taking this like on the road? Do you teach this? Like what's going on with these classes? I realize COVID and stuff like that, but what's your plan with like moving this forward?
Yeah, I am. You know what? I am willing to do anything to help anyone. Um, I'm available to talk, email, uh, you know, go online, do virtual travel. I've done several presentations, conferences, like you're aware of. So yeah, I want to get the word out there. Like I said, I want to continue to learn from others. I have the philosophy of, the day that people stop learning is the day that it's time to get out of the business, and I plan on learning to the end. And but I yes, I will go on the road. I'll do whatever it takes to help people. My philosophy is, if it helps one person to not have to go on medical leave or have to get out of the business, or if they can continue in the job that they love, um, then I'll do it.
Right.
Email me, call me, whatever it takes. I'm here to help.
Okay. Catherine brings up a good question. It was actually on my mind and one of the next things I was going to ask you, but it has to do with culture and the fact that, how do you get, patrol or police or people in the, forensics to admit that there's an issue when, potentially, um, They could, well, they're worried about getting some, some problems afterwards with, oh, they can't do the job, or like, whatever, or, the chief's going to say something, or whatever. Is it, how does it, like, how can you help that situation?
Yeah, I think so. For us, we started at the top. So we started with our chief, and what we did was we we enlisted a commander that was completely on board, and we said, "Boss, this is what we need to do. There is a need for it," and he was our champion, and he ran with it and went to the chief, and that's how we um, that's how we sold it. And the chief said, "We will do this." And so, and it's not a mandatory thing. If you want to, then it's there. If you don't, you don't have to. But what we found in our department was probably the first year, maybe 20% used it. After that, as time went on, I would say that probably 80 to 85% now,
Really?
yeah, are they're on board. And it's, like it's not an overnight thing, but I think people have to feel comfortable with it, and they have to know this is the biggest thing. There has to be trust, right? You have to trust the people that are on that team. And for me, like I find that my peers, so there's 3 of us in our lab. Those other 2, those are my confidants.
Right.
Those are the people that I go and talk to. Not that I have a problem with peer support, but those are the people that I talk to, right? And like I said, even if it's just a 5-10 minute, man, that scene sucked, and this is how I feel, I'm good.
Yeah.
It's letting that stuff out of the bucket, right? It's just so it's not overflowing.
There was the I have to come back to the seed story, because that was an interesting one. But I think it was that thing regarding the, I think, was that part of therapy, or part of like the your therapy, where something about like putting a seed in your mouth or whatever. Do you remember
Oh,
that or not?
you're gonna make me tell that one, aren't you?
I want to hear it again. Hey, that stuck in my mind from your talk. So now I'm like, hey, you got to tell
Oh
everybody
my
about the seed.
gosh. Yeah. So it was a group there. It was mindfulness. And so uh, and I didn't really I'm kind of a slow guy, but it was about mindfulness and different ways of being mindful. So for me, my dog is mindful, right? I sit down with my dog and I pet my dog and it calms me. So one of the things that they had us do was they gave us an almond, and they said, for to calm you, we want you to take the almond, and we want you to feel the almond and feel the texture, and we want you to do all this stuff. Okay, now put the almond in your mouth. So you put the almond in your mouth, and now what does it feel like? And all I could think, Eugene, was I want to eat the damn almond, right? And no, they wanted you to move it around your mouth. I'm like, no, I just want to eat the damn almond. It was causing me anxiety. It wasn't calming me. It did get a good laugh at IABPA, but
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, good. We got that off the table now. You had to get that out.
made me tell it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Um, in terms of the response that you've been getting from people in different areas, or different police agencies, I mean, are people reaching out, or have you talked to people like sort of all over the country, internationally? Like what kind of response, like after your talks, like people come up to you and say certain things? What sticks out in your head?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the first one I did was in Nashville at ASA. Um, and I will be completely honest, I was scared to death. I was scared to death to get up in front of this group of people. And these conferences, these people are very well known forensic uh, people in the forensic community, and I was scared to death. And the night before, uh, this gentleman told me, he said, "You get up there and you tell your story because people need this." I got up, I did the presentation, and afterwards, people came up to me, they hugged me. Uh, they were Some of them were crying. Some of them told me my marriage broke up because I didn't talk. And they said, we want you to do this over and over and over again. And I had people ask me, will you come to this conference? Will you do this? And I'm like, I'm a crime scene guy, right? I'm just a crime scene guy I'm not an emotional wellness person. But I think it was just the fact that I was willing to get up there and just say, this is how I feel. This is my story, right? And if that's what it takes, man, I'm all about it. I will do
Right.
it. I will do
Yeah.
it continually. I will go wherever. And like I said earlier, if it helps, I'm all in.
Well, I know it strikes a chord, and I think that's the thing, that a lot of people either are going through it, have gone through it, or understand it. Because I know that in speaking with a lot of people, after your talk, it really hits people, and it strikes a chord. It's difficult not to pay attention to you when you're talking. You know what I mean? Like about your personal experience and that sort of thing. And I think,
Well, I think it's that people are afraid. This is my perception. I think people are afraid to say, "Yeah, I'm going through this." I think I don't want to feel weak, or I don't. But if someone gets up and says it, then they're like, "Yeah, man, I'm feeling the same way." I feel that it's okay to say it now, right? Okay, great. I'll be that guy. I don't care. I'll be vulnerable. I'm
mhm.
good. I'm good with that.
Yeah. I was just trying to relate to one of the experiences that I had, and I was in Oregon, and there was it was part of a training thing that I was doing with one of the police agencies. But I got a call at 2 in the morning and said, "Hey, there's something going on. Like, we want to use the equipment and stuff like that to come on out, right?" So, and that one was pretty gruesome. And so, I don't get to these things very often, very few times actually. But I can tell you that the feeling I had was, while I was there, was play it cool, man. Play it cool.
Yeah,
In my head, I'm just going, yeah, it's all cool. Like,
yeah,
but when you're saying in your head, play it cool, it means there's something wrong. Like
yeah,
it's not really, it wasn't very comfortable.
yeah.
It wasn't a comfortable position to be in, but you try to hold it together, and just like, and I find that humor is an important part of this, and forensics people have a very good sense of humor.
Yes, we
Don't
we
you
just
think?
have to be careful where we're using that humor, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for sure. But
yeah,
I've definitely noticed that a lot of people in forensics use humor as a way of maybe sending a message, or possibly
yeah.
just, yeah, there's an understanding sometimes when there's a joke about, yeah, we get it. Yeah, no, it's true. So what is next for you? Like, what are you planning to do going forward? Like, are you looking at some kind of bigger things, research, more teaching? Do you get involved? Like, who are other people that are in this area too?
Man, I'm loving what I'm doing. I love the work that I'm doing. I have Triad Forensics as my little company on the side,
Yes.
and so people keep asking me. They're like, "Doug, when are you going to retire? When are you going to retire?" And I'm like, "I'm not that old. Come on, I'm not that old." So, but yeah, I want to keep working, and maybe in the future try to do a little bit more private stuff, teaching and consulting, and move that forward a little bit. But yeah, I would really love to do more of this emotional wellness stuff, do some research in that area, get back with Dr. Moss, and write some papers, whatever. I, that's really my passion. I want to help. I want to get out there and I want to help people. Just like I said, I don't want people, uh, really good, hardworking people that are in this field to have to go out on medical retirement, have to get out because of emotional things, because there's help out there, and if I can be that help, then like I said, I'm all in to do that.
Are you going to be at any upcoming conferences or anything where people might catch you, or nothing right now?
I'll probably be at the II, which I believe is what on it's in Baltimore. I'm not sure where it's at, but that's the only one I'm thinking of now. So
Okay.
But
If
it's
somebody,
always changing. Schedules are always changing.
oh yeah, of course, yeah, no kidding. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, do you mind if I just put up your LinkedIn profile? Is that okay?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. So that's Douglas's LinkedIn profile right here, and also, well, I guess they can reach you through the Triad Forensics. I'll leave that back on there as well.
Sure. Yep.
But yeah, no problem if anybody wants to get a hold of you, or you can help them out.
Yeah, I'm available anytime. Anytime.
Excellent. Okay, well, look, Doug, I think that's great. I really appreciate your time. It was a great talk. If and folks, if any of you out there can ever get to a conference where Doug's at and he's talking about this, it's really worth a listen. Some really good stories, and on a personal note, and just something that people need to pay attention of. It's not a topic that I've put here on Forensics Talks before, and so for that, Doug, I really appreciate your time.
Eugene, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. It's great seeing you again.
All right, hey, all the best. Hey, do me a favor, hang back, and then I'll be back in a second. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Cheers. All right, folks. Well, that does it for episode 74. And yeah, really great topic. If you ever get a chance to reach out to Doug, if you know anybody that needs some assistance, whatever, he's a great guy to chat with. And just a reminder again, Forensic Photography Symposium, January 16th to 19th, 2023. If you're passionate about photography or use photography in your work, whether it's for crash or crime scene reconstruction, you can just head over to the website, and there you can fill out some forms, look at the schedule, look at the speakers who are there, and much more to say and talk about. I see that the chat was really active. Thank you for everybody who put into the chat window, put some great comments and some questions. And folks, I will be back next week, and it's probably going to be the last one for the year, but looking forward to seeing you all soon. Take care, everyone. Have a good night. Bye-bye.